Welcome to my podcast, What If There's a Better Way? I'm Leah. In this episode, I speak with Sally Norton. She's an expert on the topic of oxalates, a very rare topic, but I think very important. And she has some exciting news. And those are that she's publishing her book, Toxic Superfoods. It is now available for pre-order, and there's a link in the description on where you can order it. For anybody who's going to get the book anyways, I would consider ordering it now because the number of the pre-orders are going to bump up the number of the printed books later. So, maybe worth considering. And without further ado, I want to thank Sally for coming on and enjoy this episode. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too. Can you give a little introduction about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm just a small-time nutritionist. Been in the field of public health for a long career of trying. Honestly, I started my career on some day in 7th grade when I'm like, wow, if we could affect our health through the way we eat, studying what to eat and how to live so that you're never sick and you're having a great life and you're productive and happy and able to make money and not wasting it on doctors. Wouldn't that be cool? So I've been into that actually much even before that. I just recognized really clearly at that stage that I wanted to help people not be sick. And I think I failed on that for a long time and failed for myself. I went to an Ivy League school to get my nutrition degree, and then I went on and got a master's degree in public health. And I struggled the whole time with health issues, many of which I had no concept that they were directly related to my healthy diet. So I've done a lifetime of messing up my health by following all the rules. I'm a great conformist, rule follower. Got really into the best organic plant foods and had a history of 16 years of plant-based eating, which we call it now. We used to call it vegetarianism and veganism. And I, was sure I was doing the right thing. I wasn't free enough mentally and culturally to imagine that everything that I believed to be true was full of pits and holes and flaws. So I have, once I finally figured out that my healthy diet was causing what had become a disability, I got to the point, I had multiple different disabilities over time. When I was getting my nutrition degree, I was using crutches and bought a bicycle so I could get to classes because I couldn't walk. And I ended up leaving Cornell, where I was studying my nutrition, to get foot surgery, and was gone for 4 years until my leave ran out. I had to go back, and I was still struggling with foot problems, but I was still eating Swiss chard, which is one of my lifelong high oxalate foods. And I was growing it. When I went back to Cornell, I was growing my own Swiss chard because I'm an avid gardener and have been a long time. And me nor anyone else in the nutrition field or any of the doctors I work with. And then as my life experience expanded and I worked in the integrative medicine field after getting my master's degree, I worked with all kinds of doctors and holistic healers, naturopaths and homeopaths and massage therapists and acupuncturists and you name it. And none of us could figure out how to make Sally healthier. Everyone wanted to take a stab at it, including my doctor friend who did chelation, who did IV therapies, which included EDTA chelation to deal with my aluminum and mercury and, vitamin C IVs. I've been around the block and none of it was helping. So when I finally, just before I turned age 50, I finally had this insight, thanks to the Vulvar Pain Foundation, who is an American-based organization that's been around over 26 years, teaching people that oxalates in foods can create pelvic pain and genital pain in both women and men. But it started off with a woman who had this really evil case of genital pain. And when you have this condition, they surgically remove the glands at the opening of the vagina, and then that doesn't work. And then they laser the vulvar tissues multiple times over here as if that's supposed to help. I mean, we laugh because it's just so horrible.
Yes, it is.
This is the state of medicine. Like, oh yeah, you're burning in a most tender, delicate spot that you need it to sit and urinate and do all these things on. It's like it's not working, and we're going to just do these things. And of course, so she persisted to find answers, and she worked with a guy who tested her urine, and they started seeing these peaks of high oxalate in her urine, and that was like, okay, well, maybe oxalate has something to do with it. And so they educated themselves on oxalates, and she tried the diet and got tremendous relief, and they started a whole pain project research and worked with almost 4,000 women who voluntarily had their urine sent in and helped to pay for the cost of the test kits to do it because they didn't have a budget. Nobody funds this work, right? So the women themselves had to help fund it by helping pay for the costs. And they found that amongst these nearly 4,000 women with genital pain, that they had this pathology with the oxalate levels in their urine. So thank you to the Vulvar Pain Foundation, because I had an attack of that lovely experience, and my husband found them online. So thank you, Internet. But the thing is, what's so interesting is when I finally it took me over 3 years to really understand. It took me almost 4 years to actually get through my thick skull, because they didn't know. Modern science hasn't really pulled it together. But it finally dawned on me after playing around, getting aware of oxalates and become oxalate aware in the way I was eating. So I knew when I was adding foods that had significant oxalate and knew when I wasn't. And that allowed me to observe my body in a new way, because I never had that filter of thinking about foods in terms of how much oxalate I'm consuming. And that led me to recognizing that my lifetime of arthritis, I started having back pains and joint pains, arthritis and inflamed, weak hands, etc., as a 12-year-old. And it was really bad in my teens and 20s, especially in my 20s during my vegetarian years. And it didn't get any better when I went vegan. I had problems walking up and down stairs. I'm in my mid-20s, and stairs are really hurting my knees. And that I got into like taking yoga and doing these things because I was sort of feeble youngster. Because I was very devoted to eating healthy vegetables. I have always loved vegetables and grew them, and beets were big growing up, and we had rhubarb, and I was a big eater too. I had a pretty big appetite, and I would come home from high school and like make myself a pint of iced tea and then have some tuna fish and then eat a bunch of apples, and I was a big eater. All that to say is that my enthusiasm over natural foods, my professional commitment to like eating well, didn't work out so well. I thought, well, golly, this is not cool that, we don't know about this, that some people could be harmed by healthy foods. So I started teaching it, and I thought it was just like, well, there's some other people who can't get help if they go to their doctor, so I'll just start sharing. And I was surprised at how many people and how many conditions respond to this diet. Maybe this is a whole new thought. Maybe oxalates are bad for everybody, and at some level, we're all overeating too many foods with high oxalate levels and accumulating oxalate-related problems that just look like old age. It just, arthritis isn't common for 12-year-olds, but it's still common for 50-year-olds. So we start blaming our age or menopause or this and that. Well, with subtle poisoning, maybe it takes a few decades for you to completely fall apart. So when you get into your 30s, 40s, and 50s and things aren't right, you're like, well, is it just me? Is it old age? We never really think, the standard way of eating might be creating this sort of problem. And the sad thing is that many of my clients and followers are pretty young, coming to me in their 20s with lots of problems. There's one right there. Very cute one. Tell me about your situation.
Oh, so I did the whole vegan thing too. What a mistake. Oh my god. And at the time, unfortunately, it was helping me with headaches that I had at the time. So around 15, 16, I had lots of headaches. And I switched to a whole foods vegan diet. And it helped. And I was so glad it did. But then it was okay for half a year to a year, and then the rest started deteriorating. Back pain, knee pain, I was getting weak. Just really bad. And oh god, the digestion, horrible. But I didn't know. I thought I was doing something good for myself, and the problem was it had helped me initially. So I was really convinced that there was something there for me, or like I was afraid of going back to that state that I was in before. So that was a really big motivation for
staying
vegan. Yes.
Staying vegan, right? Because that initial response to it is pretty positive.
Do you know why people respond well initially to a plant-based diet?
I have a couple of theories, and I talk about this in my book that's coming out in December, Toxic Superfoods, because, why do we feel better when we start a plant-centric diet? And I think there's several reasons for this. The biology of it is that you're usually being really careful in the beginning to select really nice foods. It's not a time where you're doing a lot of drinking and goofing off, and you've dropping restaurant foods because you have to prepare them at home, right? So you're dropping a lot of commercial vegetable, seed oils, the soy, canola, and the junky oils that are in commercial products. You tend to be making food from scratch now and just, reassembling a diet from more basic foods. So you're getting away from bad fats and probably eating less processed foods generally. The other thing you're doing is that you're eating foods that are fairly low in protein and fat. So you go on a bit of it's kind of a fast because it's lower in energy, it's lower in protein, and it's also so high in fiber and plant materials that it's hard to digest, and you're not actually getting a lot of nutrition out of this diet. So it's a nice little fast, and fasts really help reset things. It lowers inflammation to go on a fast. So you get all the benefits of fasting, but you have a full stomach and you don't feel like you're starving. Whereas a classic fast of like not eating much at all except water is going to feel more like challenging. So your belly's full, but your system is going through a fast. And of course, there's a lot of excitement and sort of placebo effect. There's the ritual of like, oh, I've got these great foods, and maybe you're doing smoothies or something. And there's a lot of emotional and social buy-in. So belief and sort of placebo effect will take you through several weeks of feeling pretty good just on the emotional high of like, yeah, I'm taking charge of my health. I'm making something good happen. And this is really good. And you hold on to that sort of the virtue attached to it too. And that gets the placebo effect helps you. But you said it didn't take but barely 6 months for you to start falling apart on it. Right.
Now, looking back, I realized that. But I stayed vegan for like 5 years.
For 5 years?
I think it was about 5 years, yes.
Well, at least you didn't do 8 like I did. Which, it's so, right now it is so popular. It wasn't nearly as popular back when I was doing it. Right now, why wouldn't you stick with it? Everybody we know online, the professors, anybody thinks that this is a good thing to do. So why would you question it?
Yeah, and the average person's conversation around food has changed. So, for example, when I was growing up, because I'm Italy, right? So it's Catholic. And so you say, okay, on Fridays we only eat fish or no meat because it's I don't know how to say it in English, but you kind of fast in a way.
Right.
Spiritually, right? But now it's like, now it's changed to, you should only eat meat once a week. Right? And it's like, oh my God, what happened? and people also think it's so much better for environment and think it's good for their health. But everybody's complaining and everybody is starting to take medications earlier and earlier. So there's definitely a mismatch there.
I think that's a really interesting point, that we once saw meat as an essential food that you had to have, but you were going to spiritually let go of that for a day and just fly with God and not, like take a God day from this essential food. And now it's completely inverted to like, this is kind of a moral indulgence to have meat at all. Versus it's a necessity. That's a huge transformation, and it can be, despite its sort of massive implications in how really what a big deal it is, it's subtle to us. Like we don't see that significant shift from relying on meats historically forever to suddenly fearing them and thinking them as bad in many levels. Bad physically for your health, bad morally, bad for the planet. It's just bad, bad, bad. Wherever you hear about meat, it's all bad news. And yet, it was always the thing we so relied on as a basic staple for living forever, since always.
And it served us really well.
We got quite far.
Right?
As a species, we've gotten ourselves into trouble getting so far. We used to not even have houses. We used to run around and be outside all the time. Now we're so protected by electricity and insulated homes and heated homes and cars and clothing and 100 kinds of shoes to keep you out of the rain. We do not know how to interact with the natural world anymore. We're very delicate, well-bred Persians. I think of us as show cats sitting on a velvet pillow. Somebody's combing us with their products, and we're all kind of weaker as a species. And it is very interesting in thinking of weakness, that weakness is one of those things you experience, this energy loss where the muscles aren't really working like they should be. And there's a mental fatigue that often comes with this, where you're having harder time engaging in mental work and even staying focused and staying reading for a long time or doing that kind of, working with language, whether you're writing or something like that. It can be, it can require you to dig deep to find the oomph to get through your day.
Right, and this can be partially because of oxalates, right?
Yes, for sure. Because oxalates, which is this little chemical, it starts off as an acid. It's a natural chemical that's all through nature. Plants make a lot of it. Certain soil funguses make it. The standard black mold makes it. Pollution generates oxalic acid in the rain, in the acid rain, in the clouds. So it's a natural chemical that's very small. It's just 2 carbon chemical with a lot of oxygens on it, 4 oxygens, that can sort of spontaneously form. So it's pretty easy for plants to make it, and it's very useful for plants, and it can be used to build crystals deliberately by plants or accidentally becomes crystals in the body. So it's a natural chemical. It's easy to get too much of it, and you can start creating this crystal. So the acid, oxalic acid, highly reactive, causes oxidative stress, causes cell damage. It connects with calcium and magnesium and iron and creates these little molecules, these mineral oxalates called oxalate salts. And they oxalic acid and these oxalate salts stick to the fat and proteins and membranes. And they tend to especially stick to cells that are old or tired and dying, wounded, infected, inflamed. And they can start, that's where the extra junk in that area. So maybe you cut yourself, or you typed all day, or you had a little frostbite, or bruise yourself. Those are areas where you're going to start getting this precipitation out where the acid starts becoming crystals. And crystals start forming, and they tend to accumulate there and stick to this undefendable material. And once a cell is dead, it can't defend itself, or it's dying, or inflamed, or infected. It can't defend itself. And of course, bacteria and other infectious agents like to stick to the crystals too. And so you can attract both the infections attract the crystals, and then the crystals attract the bacteria and give you biofilms, and even cause chronic infections from too much oxalate in the body. But the acid itself breaks down connective tissues, and then it starts accumulating in the tissues because we're eating it at most meals, and it interferes with the cells and how they function. So the cells start becoming underpowered. The enzymes that produce the ATP energy in cells get interfered with. It causes inflammation. It causes leaky cells. The mitochondria get inflamed. You get more oxidative stress depending on the inflammation. But in the meantime, the cells are struggling to do their jobs, and they're struggling just to make enough energy to do their job. So it's interfering with the jobs themselves, and it's also interfering with producing the energy you need. And so the cell's ability to maintain themselves starts to decline. So you can't necessarily heal as quickly from an injury or problem. It's also affecting any cell in your blood. It comes in from your food, gets into your bloodstream from your digestive tract. It mingles with your red blood cells into your white blood cells, which are your immune cells. And it starts causing inflammatory stress in the immune cells. It starts lowering the energy capacity of the red cells. And sometimes it causes them to explode, and you lose iron because you lose red cell count. So you might even see reduced cell count, blood cell count a little bit.
Wow.
They died. And oftentimes, like I had low white counts for years, and nobody ever said much. But once I got low oxalate, that corrected itself. Many things corrected itself. The POTS, the arthritis, the sleeplessness. It's very neurotoxic, so you can get lots of different neuro symptoms, like problems with sleeping well, pain problems, migraines, mood problems, physical coordination. There's all kinds of ways muscles require the nerves to work well. If the nerves are spasming, the muscles will spasm, and you might get things like constipation or diarrhea or back and forth, or you might get reflux or hiccups or tremors or twitches. Those are all problems with the nerves. The nerves aren't able to control their ions, their calcium and potassium, and all these electrolytes that run the show get interfered with because oxalate is this mineral grabber. So it affects the cell's ability to maintain the proper mineral balance in and around the cells. And for nerves and immune cells, that is really bad news. So you get a lot of and the digestive stuff that you mentioned how your digestion was terrible, as mine was too.
Whose vegetarian digestion isn't bad? People just don't say it because it's uncomfortable.
They don't say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Chronic diseases of all kinds have gotten really prevalent as I think you launched us on that very concept. Like the American Center for Disease Control says 60% of all adults have a chronic disease. Chronic disease can be arthritis, autoimmune problems, pain problems, even dental caries. But the obvious ones include asthma and breathing problems, diabetes, heart disease, vascular disease, stroke, dementia. And these, it turns out, based on, I spent years in the library trying to make sense out of this. Like, how could we think these foods are healthy and yet they're making us sick? And all of those chronic diseases can come about from oxalate exposure. All of them.
Which is terrible. And nobody knows about this. A few select people.
No, it's really nobody. It's like,
horrible.
It's very quiet. It's very quiet over here in oxalate land. It's very quiet. In fact, there's active suppression, active disinterest, active denial.
Oh,
I've tried
okay.
to reach out to colleagues in academia and basically have been hung up on. I've sent letters to colleagues and been
Wow.
ignored. I've done interviews and been hung up on, and it got canceled because certain people didn't want this out because it's opposite of all the books they've written to tell you to eat chia seeds and eat sweet potatoes and spinach and dark chocolate. That they are canceling that, and then others are making up things that aren't even true just to be able to say oxalates aren't really a thing. That's really unfortunate, but
Yes.
that's, it's very quiet over here. Except, people like yourself, when we finally realize this is what got me going, like, oh my God, I spent a whole life suffering needlessly because I love Swiss chard beets, beet greens, sweet potatoes, and rhubarb. And nobody gave me the option to choose to not eat those things. Like I was never told, you could try a diet that's low in oxalic acid and see if that makes your health better. That should be the general message about oxalates and consuming them. If you don't love your health or if you want long-term health, you should consider learning about oxalates and avoiding them. When I was in college, there's like a tiny little 1-inch paragraph in 2 places in my textbook that said, yeah, for kidney stone patients, you got to watch chocolate and blah, blah, blah. And that's the end of the story. That's all we learned in college about oxalate was it binds calcium. So you shouldn't have high oxalate and high tannin foods with a meal with calcium or else you're not going to absorb it, or you need to eat extra dairy to compensate for it. But you basically watch out for tea because it's got tannins and oxalate in it, and no comprehension of the profound effects that oxalate can have on non-kidney disease problems like digestion.
It's hard to wrap my head around the whole thing, right? So with the information not being out, then we knew about those things, right, in the past, quite a while ago. And then having my own experience of turning my health around, trying to help people, or at least suggest it, but then falling completely on deaf ears.
When you're trying to teach other people that this is something to think about.
Yeah, or just should suggest to like eat meat twice a day. Just don't worry about the other things. Just add that. Just and add the butter. It's fine.
It's fine. That's too much for some people, isn't it?
It just goes over their head. It's like not saying anything, and I think people have been so indoctrinated with the general nutrition advice, and obviously their fear for their health is great, right? Especially in recent years.
Yeah.
So they really, really cling to a doctor's opinion. And they usually just say, oh, eat a little bit less and don't eat too much cake. And that's the end of the story. And take your medication. Everything else is pointless.
Yeah, you can sympathize because there's so many opinions out there and you don't have a way to arbitrate them yourself and really think, well, who's right? So you just go with the safe one. Doctor tells me to do this. And really, 80% of people really aren't that bold to like really think for themselves and invest time to learn more. They really just like the comfort we're creatures of comfort. So if my doctor in the mainstream, like some big authority, the WHO or whatever, says such a thing, and the WHO and these big organizations in the U.S. have been very anti-meat for quite some time. And you have very little reason to question that because it's a swimming upstream kind of thing. A lot of people would rather not spend the energy doing that. It's those of us who are fallen soldiers. We've done all the things right, and we are physically a mess. Our health, we had to really be forced out of the trance that we're in. And so I'd say, even at 60% of us have chronic disease, helping people recognize that their arthritis or their breathing problems or their blood sugar problems or their weight problems or the fact that they're just not feeling 100% is something to consider. Will going to the doctor make any difference in how this plays out over the next 10 years? How much is the doctor equipped to help me avoid having this get worse? Chronic diseases tend to be subtle onset. You don't know you have them. And then when they show up, they tend to be on and off, on and off. And so the off moments give you like, oh, well, maybe this isn't really too bad. And so you can sort of deny that this is a progressive problem. The chronic diseases progress over time and eventually will be disabling and expensive. And you become an expensive end of life. So life becomes this slow, painful, preventable suffering in the last decades or so. And some people are like, well, I don't care. It doesn't bother me now. Okay. But the people around you might care if they have to diaper you for the last 5 years of your life. You might be...
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, as a woman, it's often the husband who's the one needing the diapering. And I have a friend who jokes with her husband. When he does stuff she thinks is bad for his health, she goes, okay, that's 10 more minutes in the diaper. She's like threatening him. She's not going to change his diapers on time. He's going to make him sit in nasty diapers because he's earned his disability. Because ultimately, those of us whose health is good enough to be caretakers end up getting punished for this misunderstanding about chronic disease and the misunderstanding for the causes of it. This happened to my mother-in-law. My father-in-law was quite sick in the last years of his life. And none of us knew that his big, giant 1-pound bar of chocolate that he ate every 6 to 10 days probably helped get him there. We didn't know about this. But dementia, cancers, disabilities, they're all related to this breakdown of cell function and the breakdown of the immune system and the coming on of autoimmune problems and, neurological degeneration and the loss of bone health and joint health and all the other things we tend to think of as just old age. Well, it takes a while for you to fall apart completely and you get old by the time that happens. But in the meantime, what if we didn't have to die ugly, kind of helpless death?
A death with dignity, right?
Death on your feet, out there chopping down trees and painting your own house and doing stuff. Living. Yeah.
That would be great. I agree. So in the meantime, over those decades when people accumulate the oxalates in all different parts of their body, the body must try to get rid of it at least a little bit, right? So how does that work, or what's inhibiting that from happening?
Right. So it's coming in from lots of places, but primarily your diet is providing either. So there's not just oxalic acid in the food you absorb, but there's also vitamin C can become oxalate too. So there's a number of ways where you can be overexposed to oxalate. Even my focus is on the food piece, and vitamin C is another aspect of the food piece because it's the thing that is the most common, that has the biggest impact, and is the easiest one to fix. And when you change your diet, you can tell. So when we're eating more than the body can handle, that's the accumulation problem where it starts building up in the body. Because normally it would end up in the kidneys and the urine, and much of it comes out in the urine. Now, the science has been a little bit confused on this because they assume that after about 10 hours, 12 hours, of course, it takes 24 hours for the food to go from plate back out on the other side, the sort of transit time of food and the processing of food. And then there is this 10-hour period where oxalates are coming in from the food into the body, and it's circulating in the bloodstream, going from the digestive tract, crossing the digestive tract into the blood, which goes to the liver, which goes to the heart, lungs, and through the vascular system. And then the kidneys pick it up and you pee it out. And so they've assumed that you get most of it, you pee out. It seems like the absorption and studies and all that they're thinking, well, 90% of it at least comes out pretty quickly. And I think the measurement of that is a little tricky because other studies have used radioactive oxalate in animals find that very quickly, within an hour of an injection, you've got oxalate accumulation in the tissues already. In healthy animals that don't have kidney problems, a kind of a spinach smoothie size oxalate dose will show up as crystal deposits throughout the body, including the bones, the eyes, the skin, all the tendons and organs throughout the body. So it's been tricky to study it scientifically. So there's quite a few premature conclusions about oxalate and how the body's handling it. But basically, we think of the kidneys as the main exit route. The colon has transporters that can excrete oxalate out of the blood into the feces, and you can remove oxalate through the feces. And there's a bacteria that encourages the colon to do that, that if you have it, a lot of people don't have the oxalate degrading bacteria in enough, enough of them or healthy enough or at all, where that additional assistance for excretion may not be working under typical conditions. But when the kidneys are struggling, the colon tries harder to help. So if there's acidity going on and kidney stress, the colon transporters, the cells can make different proteins that do different things, and they can sort of increase the transporters that can remove oxalate from the blood through the feces. So we can remove oxalate through the kidneys and the urine, also through the feces. It also comes out in the saliva glands because the saliva glands concentrate oxalate 10 to 40 times the amount that's in the blood. So whenever you have a peak of oxalate in the blood, you're going to have higher levels of oxalate in the mouth. And sometimes it shows up as tartar. So if people get this kind of white crust behind their teeth, that can be because oxalate levels have been high in the blood. It probably contributes to gum disease, tooth pain, tooth sensitivity. It tends to get caught in the sinus area, and that's an area where you can get bacteria and have this sort of chronic infections. Very common for oxalates to collect in the eye tissues. And so we see people often having release of oxalate through the tears and fluids in the eye. And some people talk about whole crystals coming out of their eye. I don't know what that means, if it's out of the eyelid, eyeball. I haven't seen that, but I get like styes. Ever since I went low oxalate, I've been getting styes. I just had one recently still. I've been doing the diet for almost 9 years. It'll be 9 years in about a month. And I'm still seeing some responses where it looks like it's still oxalate clearing, way less than I was. So there's lots of places where oxalate can kind of squeeze out of the tissues. It comes off the skin as well. Some people are very good at releasing oxalate through the skin. I was shocked when people started telling me they had whole crystals, visible crystals, white, sharp, tiny little like salt coming out of their skin. Other people say their skin is like shedding snow and dust. And so for some people it's very fine material. Others it's quite obviously crystalline material in response to lowering it in the diet. So when you stop eating it, the body's like able to work on cleaning house. The thing is, we never stop. So over years, you tend to accumulate it. If we were to stop eating high oxalate foods and eat, so like I think that in the old days, in the wintertime, you ate mostly meat in the winter, fish and meat, because there wasn't fresh foods available. And other than like in the last 1,000 years, grains have been very popular. So there's flour. So you have like white biscuits and ham. Ham, cheese, and white biscuits, and not a lot of salads and not a lot of nuts, because nuts are just hard to get, hard to process, hard to, have enough of them to live on them until we got industrial scale concepts to make it affordable and accessible. But eating a lot of nuts is very new. It makes sense because nuts and other foods from plants are designed to be indigestible. They're designed to be hard to get to. They're protected by the plants because of the plant's nature. And it's really not, human culture has never been built around growing up trees. Our culture has been built around hunting, and farming animals, farming cattle and chasing buffalo, and before that it was woolly mammoth and giant sloths. Bird. It's not really our niche on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do people go through different detoxification cycles? How does that usually show up in the short and long term when they actually decrease the oxalate intake?
Right. So when you're eating a high oxalate diet or like a normal oxalate diet with potatoes and peanuts and so on and chocolate, you're collecting basically crystals in tissues. And then when you stop eating it, there's this process where the body responds. Some people respond within a week, and already they can see signs that the body's pushing out oxalates. And for some of us, it just looks like cloudy urine. But what we're doing here often is breaking down crystals and turning it back into acid that can now be mobile in the bloodstream. So it was sort of hidden away, packaged in a tissue somewhere, quiet, and now you're digging it up. And so it can be painful. Like this is sort of like surgery with no anesthetic, where the process of like blasting out these crystals itself is inflammatory, can cause gout and really uncomfortable symptoms in some location. And then when you put the acid back in the bloodstream, you can get electrolyte disturbances. So you can get arrhythmias and hypertension, and you can feel like you're about to have a stroke or something. I've had people run to the emergency room because they really are quite sick with their heart rate racing and all of this, pounding in their chest, and their blood pressure is like crazy. And that's part of this electrolyte disturbance. So some really kind of frightening symptoms can occur where you feel worse as your body's trying to get rid of this. And you don't want it to happen too fast. So you might go through, some people when they start, at some point, they'll get this digestive set of symptoms where they feel like they have like a flu bug and they'll have diarrhea for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Or they'll just go back and forth with constipation and diarrhea, constipation and diarrhea. This is all part of again, electrolyte disturbances are affecting the nerves and muscles that control the colon, rectum, and anus, and this ability to have a normal bowel function is interfered with. You can get hiccups, you can get reflux. These are all spastic conditions. You get little twitches elsewhere. This is all part of the electrolyte disturbance and acidity. The releasing of the oxalate increases acidity in the body. It consumes minerals. Minerals are alkaline and help to balance acidity, as the citric acid turns into bicarbonate, which is an alkaline substance that helps to manage acidity in the body. But if you are going a little acid from this process of releasing oxalate from tissues, you can feel really off. You can feel like down emotionally, because this is another part of inflammation. Neuroinflammation creates mood changes. You can become irritable, angry, depressed, lost motivation, panic attacks, anxiety, any of those things. Even migraine, headaches can be from this neuroinflammation. And so mood changes are big. Either, you eat a lot of oxalates, you might find yourself becoming a grump, or releasing a lot of oxalates, you may find your mood all over the place. And sometimes it's just like, blah, I don't feel like doing anything. I have to drag myself through life. I feel a little like lightweight depression, or it can get to be serious depression. Those are all potentially effects on nerves, this inflammatory effects of having this oxalate poisoning. So the detox is really not like your liver fixing thing. Normal detox is the liver doing conjugation reactions and taking toxins to help you excrete them. In this case, the liver really can't help, but some people see liver enzymes get worse when they go on a low oxalate diet. So the liver's involved somehow in this, and how that works. It may just be or exposure to oxalates because it's circulating through the body? I don't really know, but we see just a crazy mess of symptoms that can be related to the oxalate clearing when it's happening at a high enough rate or, in enough tissues that it is becoming toxic again. Sometimes you just release oxalates at a nice, slow, easy pace, and it doesn't have a lot of symptoms, and you just notice like you're sleeping better, your mood is better, your pain is less, your energy is nicer, you can work out more, you feel physically stronger. When inflammation's down, you feel sturdy and capable. When inflammation goes up, you start to feel weak and fussy. And so you can go into these cycles. If you go on a diet that eliminates these high oxalate foods like the beets, the sweet potatoes, the chips, the potatoes, the greens from the spinach chart and beet greens, and the nuts like the almonds especially. If you're consistently off of these foods, you could start to see a pattern where there's like terrific days where you feel much more like yourself, much more focused and energized and pain-free and productive. And then you'll have days where it's just like awful. And so this could be a sign that your body's turning on some inflammation to clear the oxalate and then taking a break, and then you feel fine. So the sort of detoxes can be this sort of roller coaster ride of sort of refilling your bloodstream with oxalates, making yourself a little sick by doing that, and then stopping that and feeling good again, and then doing it again. So I think the body's deliberately taking little pulses where it has to turn on a bunch of activity, which is a chemical signaling that goes throughout the body that increases cytokines and inflammatory molecules that tends to give you this malaise. And then it knows how to turn itself off and say, okay, time for break. Some people, though, they get stuck in a little bit of that. But I see mostly it's a funny combination when you're fixing your oxalate sort of poisoning that we have been doing to ourselves, and that you feel better and worse all at the same time. Have you had that experience?
Yes. Oh my God. At the beginning, when I changed my diet, I started feeling, I felt like my body was like building itself, just, like everything kind of bones stronger, muscles stronger, more energy, just this building phase. But at the same time, there were those days where I was tired again, like extremely tired, or where like the pain would be stronger than it was before. So I was like, oh, what's happening? Am I doing something wrong? Is this thing really working? But then after, I don't know, a week or so, it was again better than before. And it was just like this cycle of continuously getting better and then having a little bit of downtime, let's say. And things are still and were progressively getting better. So even the downtimes are less intense. Like there's not a day that I don't do anything anymore. There used to be a lot of days before. So that's fantastic.
What kind of days were you having when you were really sick and didn't know why?
I was just tired. Mm-hmm. Just no energy, no focus. My eyes were burning from the exhaustion. So just keeping part-time job was a challenge.
Yeah, it becomes your whole focus, doesn't it? Like, what do I have to do to be able to go to work and survive it and get home?
Exactly. So there's that whole management around that one activity that you need to keep up to just have at least a little bit of a functional life.
Yeah, and you can look on the surface kind of like everything's sort of okay-ish, It's like...
Yes, people don't say anything, or maybe they really don't notice, but it kind of just goes under the radar. It's really strange. But healing is possible, so I hope that our viewers get that message.
Well, it's
And
unfortunate
not
that you were
hard to
sick as a young person. And if I was your age, I would have been ready for this diet big time because I was already a mess and, very young. And like so many of us who I'm very close to turning 60. We really don't want anyone to be getting as sick as we've gotten and stay as sick as we can. All these things. So, which becomes possible when you feel good.
Yes, it's like, oh my God, I have my own business now. I started a podcast. I'm doing so much more. Like, it's great when you feel good, when your body's functioning. Life is amazing. And the solution in many cases can be so simple. It will take a while, right? You took your time to damage your body unknowingly, hopefully. And when you found the solution, like most people seem to be back living a full life after a year, 1.5 years. For some people that are like more damaged, but people seem to heal really quickly. It's surprising.
It is surprising. It's pretty impressive.
Right? It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's almost free.
Yes. Oh my God. Like, life is so much cheaper now. Like, oh my God. You just need your food, some basic things, and you're good. And everything else is whatever you desire. Just put fun things.
Can do fun again. Yeah, isn't that amazing? So did you have a sense now how it was costing you energy and money and time to be sick?
Oh God, so much. So much. Everything. It's too much.
So how did you find this to be easy for you? Because a lot of us who are benefiting from this are going to be like, this is the easiest stuff. Once you figure out what the high oxalate foods are, this is because you don't even have to be perfect at it. It's not like an allergy, like with the wheat problem or celiac disease, where you have to be super, super careful and have like your own kitchen, like kosher, no wheat stone over here, and you can't do this or that. With oxalates, it doesn't matter if you're getting little bits of oxalate or if you eat one spinach leaf or whatever. It's not the problem. The problem is the dose. And now you know how to control the dose. And it's, once you have this filter, as I was saying earlier, now I know when I'm looking at a high oxalate food, and I know I'm not attracted to it.
No big salads anymore. Oh. That was a strange time.
Favorite high oxalate food?
I really like salads and the bitter greens, but I also was like, the chocolate. I got the raw cacao, and so I mixed like a hot chocolate drink for myself with like insane amounts of it because I was really into the bitter taste because I liked it for whatever reason. Bitter was great. So I just put tons and tons of chocolate in it. And other people couldn't even eat it.
Because it was so strong. It's sort of espresso hot cocoa.
Yeah, because I didn't add any sugar either.
Wow. Wow.
So
that is harsh. Did you ever notice symptoms after eating that, like a few hours later?
No, it was more like a stimulant for me, kind of like coffee. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't drink coffee, because I had overdone that already too in my life. So I could handle the chocolate. So whenever I wanted a little boost, I would just eat the chocolate. And as dark as possible.
As dark as possible.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the history thing. We didn't have time to get into it too much, but we knew about poisoning from too much oxalate in foods in the early 1800s. And it was a diagnosis by 1842. It was originally named this oxalate problem. And we had it as a sometimes used medical diagnosis for 100 years, and it got completely dropped. And I find that really important because it tells us a lot about human history and where we're going in modern history. There are other forces other than the concern for human well-being that have affected the way we practice all these health fields in medicine, especially in medicine and the use of pharmaceuticals. The development of that field of practice is been about many other concerns, other than what's good advice for us to really be healthy and prevent illness. It really hasn't been about that, and so we've been willing to, sort of hyper focus on small areas in health and nutrition. There was a big push in the U.S. in the 70s to study cancer and do a war on cancer. And then there was the gay cancer in the 80s. And then we've got to map the genome so we know the genetics. Once we know all the genetics, we'll solve everything. And then it was, this microbiome is the whole other thing. We got to study the microbiome because that's everything. So we get in these hyper-focused places, and then we've been into this phytonutrient thing where somehow plant chemicals, which are mostly toxic, have been heralded as beneficial and great for us. And this is really where we got stuck. We got stuck on a theory that's really 35 years old or more. The idea that plant chemicals are antioxidants, which they're not. That was an initial concept we used to talk about them, where they prompt the body's response, a defense response that increases our antioxidant response. So pro-oxidative toxic compounds have been called antioxidants for so long. People believe that. And so plants have been further elevated from not just moral, because they don't bleed when you kill them.
A plant can't die, right?
It can't die, right? It can't
but
die.
But animals suffer so much for us.
Yes, they suffer in the wild. I've watched the crows rip apart living baby birds in my yard, and it is a suffering death. The way animals die can be pretty awful. The way humans kill their food, though, it's one quick shot to the head, and they don't even know what happened to them. In the meantime, we've taken great interest in the health of animals and how to make them healthier and how to grow them. And there's lots of different species of animals, of farm animals that suit different conditions, different weather and different types of terrain, different kinds of grass and foods out there. So we've actually husbanded, many types of animal development and protected animals because we need them to survive. And so there's a certain mutual dependence there. We need them to survive. And if we stopped growing them, they would go extinct too, because there's no reason to keep wild plains of grass and let the animals roam on grass. Why wouldn't you just keep building highways and doing other things with that land? Why would you let the sheep and the goats and the cattle and the pigs roam free? You wouldn't allow that. They wouldn't survive anyway.
Yes, if we would do our culture in a regenerative way, we would have so many benefits for both parties. Well, free the earth too.
For all the parties involved to really use the animal's ability to regenerate soil. I mean, the soil, the living soil that's full of bacteria and nutrients, is the food of the planet. That's what keeps everything going. The sun and soil. If you have soil that's healthy, a lot of great things can happen. But we've ruined the soil with monoculture, tobacco and corn and wheat and soy, and these vast production of foods that need huge inputs, using lots of machinery, fossil fuels, wasting water, and losing topsoil. And regenerative agriculture has shown over and over again. There's a guy named Ian Mitchell in South Africa who was one of the great early demonstrators of this, where you could turn desert back into beautiful, lush, green growing zones by putting mobs of animals on there that are putting down a lot of poop and pee and stirring up the soil with their hooves. And voila, back comes the green, from desert to green. And we need to do more of that, get more areas green, fertile, and lush. And the right way to do that is using animals to do it for us.
Yes. So, because we've reached the hour, to last little snippet of information for the listeners and viewers. So, what is gonna help their body be healthy? And what are the most, what are the foods that are highest in oxalates that they should avoid?
Right. So really all disease comes from some combination of toxicity and nutritional deficiency. And the foods that have been able to help you be well are the animal foods that are free of fiber and these plant chemicals that interfere with digestion. So animal foods, animal fats are really important. Butter, fatty meats, organ meats, those are all very nourishing and regenerate your health. When it comes to the plant foods where the oxalates are, you want to avoid 3 greens, Swiss chard, beet greens, and spinach. Mm-hmm. And then you want to avoid baking potatoes and sweet potatoes, and almonds and peanuts and cashews, and most nuts are not so great. And if you have digestive problems, all nuts and seeds are going to be harsh on your digestive tract. And then there's the chocolate that you talked about, the rhubarb. And of course, things made with chocolate, nuts, and potatoes. There's cassava and taro, a lot of these like root chips things. Those are heavy in oxalates. Kiwi is high in oxalate. Blackberries are high in oxalate. And then the beans, the black and white beans are high in oxalate. You can use peas instead. So chickpeas and black-eyed peas and green peas are much lower in oxalate. And if you cook them properly, soak them and cook them hard heat to reduce the other plant compounds that are hard on you, which is primarily the lectins. Gluten is an example of a lectin. These are big protein molecules. So you want to be careful about seeds and beans, cook them properly, but you can have them on a low oxalate diet. And I explain some of this. I've got a cookbook available on my website if people are looking for ideas on how to cook with low oxalate vegetables and how to properly use an egg. If you haven't been using eggs, if you've been vegan, you know what to do with them. I'm like, if you're not allergic to eggs, they're a lovely food to have. They're very good for pregnant women to consume, good for the brain development of the baby. So yeah, it's perfectly safe to eat quite a bit of animal fats and animal foods, including eggs and butter, even though we've been told otherwise. But there's a whole carnivore community proving that you can do pretty well on animal foods. And historically, it makes sense that we were always hunters and that we're never been squirrels, and it's not time to become. So yeah, hopefully that gives people a real start, you know, like, okay, so, and you know, you can't love spinach and Swiss chard more than you love yourself. If that's true, you definitely need some help.
I think people just really like the meat, but they feel guilty about it because of all the things that are happening nowadays, and they're afraid. So, but it's really, you can eat meat 3 times a day.
I for years, it's been well over 20 years, I've been buying my meats straight from local farmers in my community. You know, so I know I'm supporting my local economy. Green space be productive and be able to have people make a living on it. So I highly recommend that you find farmers and buy direct from them so they can make a living. Person responsible for their well-being. I mean, nothing was more spiritual than getting to know my Amish farmer who grew our raw experience of eating, to know the story of where your food comes from, to have seen the animals in the land that's supporting them, and to have the freedom, the time to do that. I highly encourage that because it'll give you a whole new grounding in your dietary choices.
Yes, and it will taste amazing too.
Oh, the best. Some of the very best pork and beef right there in your backyard. You guys have prosciutto and some really great stuff going on over there. So
Yes. Oh, it's not bad. Not bad.
not bad. And you have sardines. Those are great too. If people are not comfortable with red meat, really get going with the fish and the sardines and that kind of thing. They're really incredible. Vitamin D, calcium, omega-3s. If you're having trouble with your mood, some sardines might come to the rescue too. So you can start anywhere you're comfortable with adding more protein and good animal fats to your diet. You'll thank yourself.
Oh, yes. Definitely. So, to close this interview, do you want to tell people where they can get more of you and maybe about your book and your website?
Yeah, please come to my website, which is sallyknorton.com, sallyknorton.com, and you can email us through that website if you like. You can sign up for group classes there. There's a lot of free information. Please read through that information. About many of the questions that you have are already answered on the website, and there's a basics document you can download. I have a PDF that's a cookbook. It's mostly in American units, but I try to put grams, weights, and things on things, so it shouldn't be too hard to use it if you're not used to the silly American units that we use in cooking. That can give you a sense of, okay, well, what do I do instead of mashed potatoes? What do I do for greens? What could I do for a little dessert idea? You'll get going that way. That'll be good. And if you order Toxic Superfoods, which is available worldwide now, this is a book that's being released on December 27th. There'll be a print book, an ebook, and an audiobook. If you pre-order it, you can get, starting in mid-November, a little 12 recipe thank you gift. So you get a little high and low oxalate list in there and some recipes, another way to get started and be part of this conversation. Be curious, what is this topic that nobody talks about? I try to cover soup to nuts as quickly as I can to keep the book short and readable. But I highly recommend, if you have the least bit of curiosity, or if you know someone who's got arthritis, inflammatory conditions, or who's falling apart, you're going to want to read this on their behalf and then maybe share passages with them to encourage their interest. Because as you started off, it's sometimes hard to help other people. And that's okay. It takes a while for us to have stuff sink in, and you just keep getting healthy yourself. Just keep being awesome. Yeah. Doing the stuff you love, doing more of it, being happy, and people will start seeing you as someone who might know something because you're functioning well and you're achieving things.
Probably being the example is the only thing you can do.
Yeah, and really there are people who want a life ring. That's why I'm doing the work, because I know there's people out there flailing, looking for answers. They really do want help. So Those who are ready, and it doesn't take any effort because they're ready to roll. They just needed a little bit of a clue. So thank you for doing this interview and helping to invite more people to think about oxalates and how you could be happier, more whole, reverse aging, kind of functional person, the one you want to be.
Well, thank you for coming on, because you're the Oxalate Queen. And when I found out about this information, it was so mind-blowing and so powerful. It really helped me go through that transition phase at the beginning. I was looking up all of your interviews, finding every bit of oxalate information, and just, getting healthier.
I am so proud of you for finding it and pursuing it. Was there something initially that really caught your attention that made you go, wow, this is a real thing?
Well, the thought that plants might be poisonous was a shock. And I got the salt in my eyes soon after starting the carnivore diet. So that was I think that's one of the symptoms, right? So I had that for quite a while. and a few other different things that you talk about and other carnivore people are talking about that can happen during the transition time.
It's convincing when you try it, but you did get yourself as far to try it. So congratulations. Thank you for helping spread the word. It's wonderful.
It's important information, I think. So
that's why I decided
reaches.
I may be a lone wolf in some ways, and that it's hard to invite fellow professionals to take this seriously. But none of that matters to me. I know there's someone like you out there who could use a clue, and that's all that matters. And by doing that, it is starting, thanks to the internet, it is starting to become a conversation. So we're already changing the world. So I want to invite everyone to be part of this grassroots movement. It doesn't need authorities, big institutions, to tell us what's true and what isn't true. Your own experience is making the truth more clear than anything else is.
Yes, I completely agree. That's been my experience too. When you finally know yourself, so not in an idea kind of way, but like understand your body, make the experience, saw the effects. You can't be manipulated anymore. You just know what's true. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that, because that's the biggest advantage of this. You come home to yourself and you believe in yourself in ways you never did before, and your confidence just can really soar. It's fantastic.
Yes.
That's the heart of the matter right there. I love it. Good place to stop.
Yes.